everyone. Thank you for joining in. Today we have all the tallest names from the retail industry today with us, and the session is moderated by Rawat. She's an entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and has a retail experience of she's a retail expert, and she'll be moderating this session. She is the founder of the Sinkhole Consultancy, and she'll introduce the other panel members also. Iti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nijansh. It was a brief and short introduction. We have got some amazing panel over here, and it's an honor to be part of this amazing webinar and moderating such a great panel. First of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Bijou Kurien. He is the strategy board member of Catterton Asia, a leading consumer and retail-focused private equity investor based in Singapore. He's also an independent director on the board of Mindtree Technologies, Brigade Group, Future Lifestyle Fashion Limited, Timex Watches, Sugna Foods, Orange County Resorts, Zikitza Health and Booker, and on the advisory board of leading management education institutes, the World of Retail Congress, and Mentor to Fiki Retail Committee. So we do have a brand and retail guru here with over 37 years of experience, and he has also been a president and CE lifestyle for Reliance Retail Limited and CEO of Titan and Product, and has been in HLL as well in his previous career stints. Also along with us on this panel is Mr. Venu Nair. He is one of the leaders in the retail industry. He's the CEO of one of the leading departmental stores, Westside. His experience and leadership spans over the companies like Tata Trent and Marks & Spencer, where he has actually seen the merger of Marks & Spencer with Reliance brands. He has also worked with Madra Garments and Urban Mills. Under his able leadership, most of these brands have seen expansion and growth. And we need no introduction of Mr. Ashutosh Pandey. He is MD and CEO of Mahindra FirstChoice Wheels. He has over 2 decades of experience in leadership roles across e-commerce and retail and functional roles in multiple industries. He has seen developed startups from the scratch, and he has also led through them to scale up as well. And he has led a lot of turnarounds and integrating businesses. His last role, he was serving as a CEO and founding member of Tata Click, an e-commerce venture of Tata Group. And last but not the least, we have a very famous Mr. Vineet Gautam. He is the CEO of Bestseller India, which is running brands like Veromoda, Only, and Jack and Jones. He has over 20 plus years of cross-functional experience in sectors of fashion, food, and telecom. He was one of the national retail heads and associate VP of Etisalat Telecom previously, and has also worked in various other functions and companies like Benetton Group, Idea Mobile, Will's Lifestyle, Cafe Coffee Day, as well as Domino's. He is very well awarded CEO and one of the most popular ones also over here. Over to the panel, and we welcome you for the discussion that we are going to have over here. We are going to start the discussion on future of retail after COVID. And I'm sure all the audience that have joined us today for the meeting, they are all eager to learn from all of you for across that what do they expect from retail. So Mr. Bijou, let me start from you. I would like to know from you that there are a lot of negativity and a lot of people are talking about that retail is not going to be the same again, etc., etc. So we really need you to start from some words of positivity first, that what retailers should be looking forward to before they begin thinking about post-lockdown era.
I think, first of all, if you're a retailer in India, by and large, you are on a good wicket. You're on a good wicket because in terms of retail penetration in India, in terms of retail per capita consumption, we are significantly lower than most other larger countries. We are about 1/10 of what it is in the United States. We are about 1/4 of what it is in China. We've got e-commerce penetration, which is sub 5%. China is currently about 25% e-commerce penetration. So from all of these aspects, whether it's in terms of market size, whether it's in terms of e-commerce trends, whether it's in terms of per capita consumption of different product categories, we're considerably lower. So we have the opportunity to be able to grow and grow much larger. However, we've come across a little bit of an obstacle at this point of time, and courtesy the pandemic, we're certainly going to find an interruption in that entire journey. And what we should remember is that this interruption will mean different things for different kinds of retailers. So maybe a grocery retailer will find the interruption a little lesser, and a fashion retailer might find an interruption a little longer. An automobile retailer might find an interruption considerably longer. A telecom retailer will certainly see very little blip in the interruption itself. But what we should be able to expect is that given this interruption, which could be as low as 3 months to as much as a year, depending on which category of retail you're in, we should certainly see the ascendant curve continue as far as the Indian retail market is concerned. We are still very low in terms of consumption, relatively high in terms of savings, relatively underpenetrated in terms of brands, as well as in terms of retail formats. So all of these have the opportunity to be able to grow. So don't think of it only from the next 6 months to a year. You will certainly have to worry about it because that's the immediate cash requirement which will be there. But if you think about it from a 3 to 5 year perspective, we'd certainly be better off than maybe the maxed out markets like Europe and the United States. So that's the tone and note that I'd like to leave.
That's wonderful. So on that note, Mr. Venu Nair, would you like to add to it that are we going to see a very different consumer behavior going forward? How is it going to change and affect the shopping behavior of a person post-lockdown?
I think first and foremost, what I would like to emphasize is that this is a temporary phase, and the market will rebound. It's a yes, there is a small drop, and obviously we are in a situation where there is a lockdown, but things will come back, and it'll take a while for it to come back. Now, in terms of the consumer behavior, again, human beings by nature are social animals, and they have to. I mean, they will go back to doing what they are doing. There is a concern currently because of the safety requirements and in terms of protective equipment and so on and so forth. But people get used to that, and over a period of time, that will become a part of how people move around. And of course, we are also assuming in this whole thing that this will stay forever. It won't. It's a question of when a cure is found, when a vaccine is found. And there are two options. You could have a cure first and then a vaccine, or both pretty much happening around the same time. And given that the entire world is trying to find a cure for it, it will happen definitely. So as that happens, the consumer behavior will come back to being similar to what it has been. However, people will be more conscious about hygiene, about the environment, and that's something which retailers will have to take into account in whatever they do. And I think especially the second point linked to that is also, and to an extent what Bijou said, a different angle to that one. Organized retail in India is around 10 to 15%. And if you look at apparel retail, it's probably slightly higher, around the 20%. Even countries like Malaysia and Thailand are closer to 50%. So we are on such a low base that it can only grow. And as the environment gets back to being similar to what it was, we will get back to the growth that we have been seeing. At the same time, organized retail also, in a way, is a better option for customers and consumers because of the fact the hygiene, the safety, and the care that would be taken, whether it is in malls, whether it is in standalone stores, will be of a very high standard because retailers are responsible and they are closest to the customer. So they will do what is needed for the customer to feel comfortable and feel safe. And I think that's what will happen.
That's amazing. And on that safety standard, Mr. Ashutosh Pandey, if you can throw light upon how do you see the businesses of pre-loved products like Mahindra first is into pre-owned cars. So how do you see that phase changing? Is it going to be the same or there's the growth expected? Or would you like to throw some light?
So I think let me first start by making a generic point. I think we are overestimating the impact that this virus will have in 12 months. But certainly we are probably underestimating the impact that it might have in the next 3 months. And that's true for across all businesses, not just retail, but retail being very, very customer focused, very, very customer, close to customer may feel the impact a little bit more. Coming specifically to your question, I think there are three trends that I can see with reference to pre-owned products, or used cars is one of the examples, certainly in a higher price bracket. One, of course, is which is slightly longer term, which you will not see immediately, but certainly is there to stay. One is about digitalization, which means that even product categories which were until now not very, very digital, the journey, part of the journey or a significant part of the journey will become digital. And that digital is not just website. That will be leveraging of data to prospect a customer much more intimately and much more at a distance. I think that is something that will be much stronger. Second, of course, is the relevance of physical. That, while on one hand, there'll be a lot of digital, the whole world was going gaga of how, say, Amazon is going to take over the world. And there you are, you need the local grocer next door, next to you, to at least give you your daily supplies. And God forbid, if your building is locked up, then you are praying that he's not COVID positive, unless otherwise you won't get your food at your place. I think the relevance of physical coexisting with digital is a very, very interesting trend that will happen. Third is that there will be a little bit of a break to premiumization, because every retailer, retailer across categories was trying to kind of premiumize its portfolio, which is something that will happen. So what will happen for Mahindra first choice or used products, sanitization, or those kind of things will now become very centerpiece. So for instance, what we are going to do when we start up our operations is that before every test drive and after every test drive, the vehicles will be in a way sanitized. There is an SOP that is being circulated. Now, like I said, it will be far more intense in the first 3 months, and gradually people will learn to live with the virus. But the fact is, these kind of things actually give you one good, unintended outcome. The unintended outcome is that there is one big push that comes to any long-term trend. I think this time sanitization and all these things will be short-term impact. The longer-term trend is the impact that it will give to a confluence of both digital and physical.
Absolutely. So on that note of the supply chain that you were talking about, that the e-commerce needs to maintain, Mr. Vineet, Gautam, would you like to add your points on how do you see the supply chain of the fashion retail also happening? Are you suggesting, or do you envision more Make in India happening, or is it a opportunity right now that is existing for India?
So I think I'll answer it in two ways. I completely agree with what Bijou and I think the other panelists have said. There is a short-term pain, but I think the future is bright. And I think we should all keep that focus very, very clear, though we will have to take very hard and strong measures to manage the 3-month to a 6-month situation. And then I think, especially during Diwali and I think festivity, the industry, across industry, there will be an upswing. And I think we will see recovery much faster from then till coming back to normalcy. And I think depending on the industry, it could span from 6 months to 12 months to 18 months, depending on what industry we are talking about. But when it comes to fashion, I think the fashion life cycle is very, very different. Here we have to launch products every week, every month. So I think the supply chain here is completely different to the supply chain we're talking about other industry. So I think in the short term, there is some disruption, especially to do with the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, because a large part of that dependency was with China. But I think now that with imports opening up, China operating in full swing, I think that should come to normalcy very, very quickly. The bigger challenge I think the industry will see in the short term is going to be migrant laborers, because a large part of the factories are run by migrant laborers. And I think some of them have already gone back, or some of them, the moment the lockdown opens, will want to go back. And I think overall in next 3 months, you will see normalcy coming to that. And I think all companies who are in the fashion domain should definitely emphasize that. But I don't think in the first 3 months is going to be major impact, because I think every retailer in this country has enough inventory for next 6 months. So I think they need to now actually look at future of 6 months of how to control the inventory situation, then worry. So I think from a fashion perspective, and I think from other industries also, there is enough inventory available in the system. I am sure the car manufacturers also, there's enough inventory because they just moved to BS6 and they had to start manufacturing. And I think overall, we will all be able to manage this supply side of the challenge. Though I think it needs more collaboration to work with suppliers. I think the challenge will be people who do not have a very secure supplier base and who've been not working as partners and have been shopping around to figure out the best price. They might just get impacted a large part because you do not have a collaborative approach. But I think those who are working collaboratively should not find a major challenge on the supply chain. Though I will say from a long-term perspective, there has to be a much more collaborative approach of working with suppliers. Then I come down to the Make in India, and I think, though I think I am a firm believer in Make in India. As our company, we manufacture a large part in India, but there are some inherent challenges around supply chain in fashion. That some kind of product lines are just not made in India, or even if they are made in India, stitched in India, the major production of the tier two, the trims, the everything else comes from China. So I think it's going to be a medium to a long-term impact where factories will come up and Indian retailers or fashion companies will start to look at to create that here. I don't foresee this Make in India as a 3 months, 6 months project where suddenly you will see upswing of factories, because capital is rare, is not available currently. Cash is the biggest challenge which I think everyone in this country is facing. So I am not expecting large capital investment happening in creating those capacities or creating those supply chain companies. So I think from a 3 years perspective, yes, Make in India will improve. Nationalism across the globe is becoming very, very large topic. Everyone wants to do onshoring, then offshoring. And I think from a globalized world, which earlier we used to call global as a very, very proudly, and I think that's going to change to a little more larger local. I think in the local is going to become larger point, because it's and it is good for the country because we will save on dollars, we save on a lot of things. I think which is good, but it's not happening tomorrow. And I think we should not even try to do that, because the next 6 months to 12 months for all fashion retailers and all companies are to fix what's gone wrong and then start to re-strategize the sourcing mix, the looking at where the product is going to come from. So I don't inherently see a very large challenge on the supply chain currently.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Bijou Kurien, on that note, because you have handled so many things together, I would like to understand from you if do you see a lot of opportunities of mergers and acquisitions within the retail industry happening together because of various issues that are right now occurring, or opportunities you can say that are getting created right now?
So retail is one of those businesses where it's normally lowly capitalized, yet on the other hand, it benefits because it's got negative cash flows. So typically, the investments you make in running a store and the investments you make in the total business get compensated by the amount of time that you get to be able to pay your suppliers. And that's how you kind of balance out the entire thing, because if it's in fashion where you pay in advance for clothes, then your margins tend to be higher. And in food where your margins tend to be lower, you tend to pay after your sale is over. Relatively speaking, that's how the retail business works. So what does happen in a situation like this is that the moment you stop selling, immediately what hits you is the fact that you don't get revenues, you've got costs. And then there is no more the concept of negative working capital because you don't have incomes after that. So you start having to, first challenges in terms of paying your suppliers, and the second challenge is in terms of paying the costs. And if you're in the fashion business, your costs in terms of rentals and employee costs tend to be a higher percentage of turnover. And in the food business, it tends to be a lower percentage of turnover. And what does happen in these situations is that in the fashion business, if you don't have revenues, then your costs tend to be a sizable part of your supposed revenues. And in the food business, if you don't have revenues, it's a smaller part of the cost. So what tends to happen in these kind of businesses is that classically in the fashion business, and especially in the non-branded fashion business. When I say talk about the non-branded fashion business, I'm talking about retail brands like department stores, where they might have a very small offering of the of own store product, own store brand products, and a larger offering of national brands, as opposed to say a brand of garments, let's say like a Veramoda or something like that. So in that category, which is typically department stores, where the costs are very similar to fashion, yet on the other hand, they don't have the margins because of the fact that they're not significant brands by themselves and they're selling other people's brands, there is immediate pressure which comes onto the business. So what if you go back to 2008-9, what you do see is that the first hit typically is in the fashion business. And in the fashion business is a retail fashion business where the hit tends to be the highest. And that is the category which typically tends to end up either doing a store portfolio rationalization first in order to make sure that they stop bleeding cash. Or the second part of it is in terms of being able to figure out whether they can actually do a merger or an merger with a more well-capitalized company so that the other company's capital can hopefully carry them through. And what I do see is that in this situation, certainly I see this challenge in the US and in Europe. Europe less, in US more, where you will see certainly in the department store category, several of the department store brands going through this big challenge of actually closing down stores and secondly, winding up or getting bought over by somebody else at a pretty low valuation. So that is something that normally happens. Also, what tends to happen in these situations is that better capitalized companies tend to go into the market at this stage. And they go in to do two things. One is whether they can pick up a less capitalized company at an attractive valuation. And the second is when they can go in and corner real estate. So these are the two things that they tend to do because the existing companies might not be in a position to be able to expand and acquire new properties. But if you're a better capitalized company, you can get properties at very, very attractive prices. So you end up either picking up another business at an attractive valuation, or you pick up properties at an attractive valuation. And that's the other area which typically tends to happen. So you either have, companies getting bought or acquired or properties getting acquired in order to be able to support businesses. But at the end of the day, what you will see is that there will be lesser number of companies operating in the business than when you start. That's the reality.
That's absolutely correct. And that brings us back again to rethink our cash reserves and think about how do we continue sustaining and paying our bills, whereas there is no or absolutely zero revenue that is coming to us. Mr. Venu Nair, would you like to throw some light on that, that whether the strategies of a person who's at a retail end should be thinking about something else to save this cash reserves, whether he should be thinking about some hardship funds to get from the government or some rental renegotiations that he can manage, or probably some tax holidays that they should be looking forward to.
Yeah, I think all of what you said will come into play. I think what has been repeated, and I think needless to emphasize, is the fact that cash is king. And at this point in time, for all businesses, managing cash, reserving cash, cutting down on capexes, any new spends, all of that is what every business will do. Beyond that, I think each business will have to look at its own strategies and what are the relationships, what's possible, and what they will need, that they will be able to get. Because it is a phase where each business has to look at what works for them and work out strategies which will work for them.
Correct. So that's amazing. And Mr. Ashutosh, would you like to talk about also some of the features that you would have added post-COVID for the people safety, the employee safety, the customer safety, and how exactly you would see that happening in near future?
So I think, some of these things are pretty standard, which are being followed across all establishments. You have to remember that, malls and places where people tend to congregate are always going to be on the radar of any enforcement agency, because they are the easiest places to close down. So you will see a stop start, and therefore you will need to look at safety both for employees as well as for customers, from both a short term as well as a longer term perspective. And short term, when I mean short term, it's just about immediate. For instance, if the mall has been asked to close down, what is the protocol that you need to follow, right? Or if that area has suddenly become a red zone and it gets kind of, the establishments are asked to shut, then like Vineet mentioned, some of the employees are actually migrant workers. How do you make sure that they kind of go to their places, right? So this is one part which we as retailers, largely on the high street, that's where we kind of most of our shops are, and more because it's all franchised. So we have to manage through the franchisee network, and therefore managing it from a very strong SOP perspective, training perspective becomes very important. When it comes to customers, I think there will be, like I mentioned, a heightened awareness amongst customers themselves about hygiene. So some stuff like masks and gloves and sanitization and hand sanitizer and stuff. These are now going to be pretty specific, pretty normal that you will see around you. You shouldn't be surprised to see a lot of those just as notices and very prominently put notices in the malls or outside the shops or inside the shops, indicating what to do when you kind of almost like fire safety drills and instructions. So these are some of the things that you will kind of you will see. But I just wanted to add one more point to the cost bit that was being talked about. I think one of the most important things to do in this period also is to try and manage your receivables, because while most of the retail is actually a negative working capital business, this is the time when, like Bijou said, your working capital cycle actually turns around. And for trading kind of companies who are buy from someone and kind of sell it to someone, receivable management becomes a really big portion of their thing. So you shouldn't be surprised to see a lot of bill discounting, or renegotiation of receivables and so on and so forth. That's going to happen. In fact, in our industry, that's one big thing that's been happening over the last 45 days.
Sure. So, Mr. Vineet, do you see once we open after the lockdown, is it going to start off from end of season sale, or is it going to be deep discounting that would start? Because you also mentioned that there's a lot of inventory right now that is lying with the retailers.
So I think we have to look at it from two different perspectives, and it will differ from retailer to retailer and brand to brand, and purely depends on how much desperate are you for capital or cash. I think if you look at the reason of putting an EOSS is, and you will see that sales numbers actually double or triple, because the traffic also doubles or triples. But in a situation when we're going to open up, people are going to open with a lot of caution. Customers are not going to come in, and that's what we are seeing in our stores in China and Europe. And I think at that time, going for discounting is going to actually lead into margin loss for the companies, because customers buying is not going to increase. They're going to still be, there's limited number of consumers who are going to come to your stores to shop. So I think to start slowly, and then over the time when we start to get more traffic and more confidence of the customers build up, I think will be the right time to start discounting. Yes, I know a lot of companies are in wholesale model where they have to sell something to generate revenues. They will definitely push their partners to liquidate inventory. But I think on an overall basis, it is going to be challenging, because more inventory you have to buy means you need more cash today, and you already have a lot of money blocked in the in inventory. So it will depend from how desperate you are to generate cash. So for someone who can generate cash from some other aspect, it's going to be that they will not discount. Someone who has no other ability to raise cash, the only way will be to liquidate whatever they have in terms of merchandise and raise cash. Though I think it will be counterproductive. People will lose more money than ever, because I don't think the sales is going to become from 100 to 200 if you discount initially. The first 3 months, I think, is going to be a lot of caution. And also, I think if you look at spring, we went on lockdown around the 14th of March or the 15th of March. The spring collections had just got launched. So they were not even seen 4 to 6 weeks of sales. So I don't think it makes sense to put a lot of inventory on discount. And the third part is our country's weather system is very different to Europe. We for till about October end and November, we are not going to have any winter. So we have no desperation from the weather perspective to change the fabrics or to change the product line, unlike the counterparts in the Europe. So, and we can easily continue this inventory for a larger point of time, which is currently fresh, crisp inventory lying in the stores, warehouse, or the supply chain. So I think it should not be done. But I think we have many wise people running businesses in this country, and each of them will take a wiser decision depending on their company's ability to generate cash.
Absolutely. I think with retailers, it's always the chicken and egg story, whether to hold on to the cash or to discount more and get more sales happening. I believe that even consumers have changed quite a bit. Earlier, they were always in a mode of earn and burn, and now they have learned the trick of staying low, staying with limited resources, etc. during the lockdown. Do you see a major impact that would happen to at the consumer behavior also after the lockdown?
I So my view is different. I don't think this lockdown is going to change behavior from a long-term perspective or a medium-term perspective. Yes, short-term, we will not be confident to go to the shopping malls and buy. Also, the economy is under strain, so there are salary cuts, job losses. People are going to buy a lot more white goods because they suddenly realize after working at home that you need many more white goods than ever you had realized. So I think they will see an upswing, and I think the initial part there will be a challenge in terms of money availability. But I think overall, if you look at the demographics of our country, and I think Bijou said, Venu also said, it's a very young country, and we are a very social country. We love to go out. Okay, end of the day, in our country, we don't have parks, we don't have beaches. You end up into a shopping mall end of the day for entertainment. The initial part, the cinema and the food courts are also going to be closed, so there's going to be a little bit challenge. So consumers might not come in. But I think over time, around Diwali, there will be many reasons: festivity, marriages, change of weather, and I think that will push customers to come back to the stores. Initially, for perspective, I think online will get a little bit of an advantage because consumers will be more happy ordering from home and then receiving at home rather than going to crowded places. But I think I don't foresee a long-term change in consumer behavior. And I actually think the other way, sitting at home, the sizes have changed. Hopefully people will have to come and buy for new products. And also, I think people have cleaned up a lot of their wardrobes. And as a retailer, I'm saying, so they have made more space for more garments to come in. So over, I think 3 months down the line, we should be quite decently back. It will take 3 to 6 months for normalcy to return. And then I don't see a larger change of behavior.
Absolutely. I see a lot of positivity there in your words. And Mr. Bijou Kurien, I would like to request you to add on the point of view, because you started and you spoke about a lot of online trend changing and a lot of tech getting introduced to retail. So how do you see, and which tech do you see is going to lead retail from now onwards? Would you like to throw some light there? I think, Mr. Bijou, you're on mute right now.
I don't think any specific technology is going to actually play as important a role. However, I think the larger change that you're likely to see is that a lot of the offline players who figured out that, there is another world which is online, which they had shut their eyes to. Have realized that, in situations such as these, it might be also better to have a foot in that space. So you will see a lot of offline players trying to bolt on an online face to their own businesses. So that is one. So where you'll see the transition going from offline to online. I think Vineet mentioned earlier about contactless. And I think one of the challenges in fashion is the fact that you've got to try garments which other people have tried. You've got to go in and make payments. So there's a whole bunch of things around figuring out how to keep things sanitized so that it is safe. So there will be a larger emphasis in terms of contactless. So whether it's in terms of payments, whether it's in terms of trials, whether you're going to be using virtual reality to be able to figure out how to trial garments as opposed to actually physically wearing them. There will be, areas like that which will happen. The third is that, what a lot of brands have seen is that the entire communication, which earlier used to be in mass media, currently has moved to social media. So they are keeping in touch with their customers and keeping them abreast of what is happening in the context of social media. So there's a communication between brands and their customers, which is actually happening. So if you were to ask me, I think the larger advent of digitalization into the businesses of offline retailers, the larger use of social media to keep abreast with your consumers, and thirdly, even the smallest retailer, which is your local convenience store or the neighborhood grocery store, will also find it important to be able to get online. And while they might not do it directly, you might have several other platforms which will enable them to be able to get online, and these platforms will then be the catalyst for the larger ecosystem to develop. So these are some changes that I see. I think Vineet's got a point to add too.
So I completely agree with what Bijou said on the online space, but I think a large part of this swing is going to be hyper local, which I think till today was a lot more not thought about or not done. Till today, even those who are on e-commerce are trying to run this through their warehouses or partner warehouses. Suddenly, I think the entire ecosystem is going to change with the nearest shop. How can I fulfill orders? How can I make it faster? So I think that where the one part of the tech that's going to change is hyper local. And I think the other thing which I think will happen across industry is that we have to suddenly realize that we need a larger business continuity where automation needs to become much bigger, and dependency on people and their availability online is going to be very, very. So I think robotics is something which definitely is going to move a lot of mundane jobs which people were doing, running servers, running some programs, running things, are going to move on robotics. And I think it was already happening, but this is going to really fasten up the process because suddenly we realized overnight that we didn't have people to run and do some processes which were important for our people to do some stuff at the home also. So I think that's going to push. The third, I think, is a little bit of AI coming into fashion. And I think this was already being tested. It's going to fasten the speed because end of the day, if as fashion retailers, we know how much capital and money is blocked in inventories. And if we can make it a little more better, sharper, and I think our this buying through gut reduces and gets with a little more data driven, I think we should all be very happier because suddenly the respect for cash will increase. At least in the medium term, the respect for cash is going to increase. I don't know, maybe long term we go back to our old habits, but I think it is going to push a little bit of technology in this space also.
Mr. Ashutosh, Mr. Venu, would you like to add as well? What are the changes that we see from you guys?
I think I just want
Ashutosh,
to
go first. Yeah, go on, Ashutosh.
Okay. So I think one of the things we should not forget is the lowly WhatsApp, which actually is probably the most powerful technology changing retailing in these COVID times. And I think increasingly you will find that retailers will realize, or the neighborhood kirana guys will realize that it's very difficult for them to find a presence on a larger platform. And therefore, WhatsApp related integrations will become far more. WhatsApp for business, WhatsApp related integrations will become far more common. The second piece is, I think, like has been mentioned, data-driven digital marketing. I think the digital marketing, which relied on a lot of spends on Google or on social media, is going to be replaced with much more targeted. So all the technologies that are around that, where you could prospect, you could spot, you could kind of create third-party, second-party data to create a profile of the customer. That is another piece which will be inside the box, but every single guy, every single retailer, especially the organized ones, need to take care of. And finally, I think for larger product categories, which are slightly more expensive, say jewelry or for auto, etc. The whole visualization, three-dimensional visualization on a 2D surface, on a screen is something that, including 360 degrees, those are the kind of technologies which will become pretty mainstream in the next 6 to 12 months.
Great. Mr. Venu, we would like to hear from you as well, and specifically on the experience of a customer that is going to drastically change because of the safety measures that we are going to adapt going forward. Social distancing is going to be norm in the departmental stores. So how do you see that changing for our customers who is coming to a Westside store?
I think there are four things which will be important if you look at for any retailer. And first and foremost, especially in the short term, and that will continue into the medium and will become a norm, is just trust. For a consumer, for the customer to be able to trust the shop that he is going into, a mall that he is going into, that becomes a very, very important aspect. And trust from multiple points. It is from a safety point of view, from a hygiene, trust the merchandise that's in the store, the quality of the product, all of that would come into that. So trust, I think, will be very, very important. And closely linked to that is also the brand. And I think one big differentiator as we come out of this is the importance of the brand. How loyal are your customers to your brand, and how recognized is the brand? How much do people trust your brand? And I think this again, the loyalty and importance of having loyal customers being the ability to go back to them, personalization, digitizing and using the digital mediums in terms of communicating to them so that it's much more sharper, much more accurate, and tailor to the individual requirements of that customer. I think all of that will become much more salient and important in the new world. And that's where, again, I think the brand will become important. And a brand like Westside obviously stands to gain on all of these factors. The third, and I think, again, underpinning all of this is finally fashion and the product itself. Because finally, people come in to buy a product, they come in to buy fashion, and they want to be tempted, they want to be lured into buying something. And that is paramount. And that's one of the underlying factors for the power of every single brand. It is offering something which allures you, which you're absolutely wanting, looking for. And closely linked to fashion is value. And value is just not just price. It is a combination of price. It is a combination of the environment that you're offering. It's a combination of the style and fashion that you're offering, and the convenience of all of that put together. So I think each of these factors will become very, very vital for every single retailer as you go forward. Trust, brand, value, fashion. And all of these delivered seamlessly in an environment they can trust.
That's amazing. Brand, value, fashion. Audience, if you are hearing this, this is coming directly from the leaders of retail industry, and this is something that you guys have to focus upon. There are a lot of questions that we are getting from the audience also, and we would like to throw some questions open for the audience to ask as well. So let me start with some of the questions that are already given, and we can probably open it up for any of the panelists to take that up. So first question is coming from an anonymous attendee saying that, do you foresee any permanent change in the buying behavior with the spends bouncing back? And that was also one of my questions too, that do you see a lot of demand fluctuations changing, and how does a retailer deal with those kind of demand fluctuations? And what is the framework strategy that he should be adapting at this point of time?
I think I said this before that initially there's going to be a lot of changes. We will see demands less, and I think also consumers trying to behave and buy less. We've seen this in China already. The basket has shrunk. Europe is too premature because it's just been 2 weeks, so I can't comment on that. But China, we're already seeing, we have 7,000 stores in China, so we're already seeing that trend of consumers buying a little less on the basket. On a long term, I don't foresee a change. I think it will become the opposite. And I think Venu said it, customers who will trust you will buy and shop with you much larger than what they will try to do other places. And I think there's going to be a large shift from the unorganized to the organized sector, purely because of safety and hygiene perspective, because consumers will want an environment which is safer. And I can tell you today, when you walk down to a neighborhood shop, you think twice and before you go to maybe an organized retailer. So I think that behavior definitely is going to change. So organized retail is definitely going to get benefited out of it. I think in the short term also, you will also see a lot more top wear selling more. We all work from home, and the only thing you see is top wear. We don't, right? And I think that's going to be a small change, but I think it's going to be a notable change for a while. The third is, I think, athleisure being a category that is going to become much larger. It was already growing faster than any other category. I think that's going to see a larger upswing, much more. And I think every retailer is doing that, especially in the fashion domain. Masks are going to become the new accessory. I think that's going to be something which is going to be a new category which we can all focus on. From a long-term perspective, I think demands will come back. Whether they come back online, offline, I think it's a guesswork. We don't like to. I think retailers will not like to take it. But the only thing I will suggest is don't plan 2 years, 3 years today. There's going to be a huge swing, and I think all of us will only second guess what is right. Uh, be agile, be faster in making those changes. Maybe a 3-month strategy is currently to start with is good, and then from there take on quarter by quarter rather than going ahead and putting a 3-year plan, which I don't think is the right way to do it currently.
Great. Yes, Mr. Ashutosh, you have to add some.
I think one of the points that I wanted to mention about the larger value categories, I think one has to keep in mind that, there is evidence, and we have done some research on what is the customer perception on how do they want to see the post-COVID, purchase behavior. Is that what we have kind of tried to research? And we have found evidence that there will be, at least in higher value purchases, an element of down trading. So if people were looking for a certain category of cars, they will probably look at one category lower. One has to keep in mind, like has been mentioned earlier in the panel, that the economy wasn't great to start off with, right? And this one has actually put a lot of brakes on salary cuts. There may be layoffs, etc., etc. All that will put it back in the in the purchase basket, which is why while fashion retailers might not see so much of an impact in the medium term, you will see the higher value purchase, the evidence of customer behavior change for a slightly longer term in the higher value purchase segment.
So just to add to what Ashutosh said, I think just to kind of confirm it, if you look at it internationally, the entire value food category, with let's say brands like Aldi and Lidl, and then if you go back to the US, the Family Dollar, TJ Maxx kind of chains, all of them actually grew after 2008-9. They kind of cemented their place in 2008-9 and have been continuously growing after that, and in the context of department stores declining. So that is one. If you look at Amazon's actual acceleration, it accelerated after 2008-9 when price became very important, and they took the price discounting route in order to do that. If you look at the domestic fashion business, you'll see brands like Max, and of course now the whole value fashion category has actually grown larger and larger and is a much larger proportion of the total fashion category in India than what it was about 10 to 12 years back. So some of these economic shifts which are leading to lower, purses, smaller purses, lower aspiration to spend, lower appetite to spend, also accelerate some of these value trends in the overall product categories and in the market.
And do you see some opportunities also underlying there in a post-COVID era? Somebody, Mr. Chandrasekhar has also asked about it, that is this the right time for a EBO expansion to happen? Or what's your viewpoint there?
Venu?
I think, again, that's a very generic question. And in a way, it was touched upon earlier. It depends on, finally, as Bijou said, it depends on, either you would look, companies would look to acquire or expand, because there would be properties available at very attractive prices. But it needs to tie in with your long-term strategy and where is it that you want to go, and obviously how fast you want to burn the cash that you have.
Also, there is one more question for you, Mr. Venu, from another person who's asking, with people avoiding a lot of packed street and avoiding crowded malls, etc., will the standalone stores will be getting more opportunities?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the care and attention that standalone stores or malls will take, and certainly brands like Westside, the amount of attention in terms of sanitization of the store, the safety of the customer, maintaining the social distancing within the store, all of that would be of the highest order. And as Vineet said earlier, compared to a lot of the markets, this would be a much more conducive and uh, the ability to maintain social distancing will be far more in standalone stores than it would be in crowded streets.
Great.
I think the question on brick and mortar and EBOs, I think if you have the capital and you can sustain it, this is the best ever time to expand. And if you don't have the capital or the capacity to handle it, stay away as much as and give up all your loss-making stores today. So it's both sides. Depend on which side you are, and then take the decision.
And stick to your 3-month strategy is what Mr. Vineet says. Great. Another question that is coming from Ms. Pallavi is that do you see a big shift in the concept of brand loyalty, specifically for non-FMCG, she is asking, going forward, taking into consideration the customer psychology?
But as I said before, I think brand loyalty will become even more important going forward because people in times when they're looking to spend less than what they were before, as would be the case probably in the next 3 to 6 months, they would naturally veer towards brands that they can trust, the brands that they have got a relationship, and the brands that they value. And it is for the brand equally, a lot of the trust of the brand is based on offering fantastic product at absolutely unbelievable prices. And that will continue to be the mantra for brands that would want to be successful. And if anything, brand loyalty will only increase, is my view.
Sure, sure. And do you also see that the fresh ordering would be starting for retailers from the mills, or it's not the right time yet?
I think, sorry, we're going to go for it.
Go on, Vinay.
No, go.
I think, I mean, it depends on finally, in the short term, everyone's got inventory for quite a while. And it is about offering finally product that's right for the market and for the period. As you get into the festive period, that's when the newer fashion would start to come through, and that's where each brand would start to look at what they want.
Yeah, Mr. Vineet, you would like to add something?
So I was almost saying what Venu said. I think looking at the value chain and how fashion works, there's a 9-month cycle to ordering. So I think a lot of people are stuck with inventories or fabrics or something. So I think it's going to take a while for the entire supply chain to get corrected. Unless there is a product innovation someone is doing on from a antibacteria and whatever, I think that's definitely an opportunity. And if you are in that business, I think please go and invest in more production, because suddenly you are going to be in demand. Because everyone psychologically wants to get into buy things which are a little more hygienic. So I think, but otherwise people should actually relook at their production lines. It might not be a big good idea to immediately go and put a lot on production.
Amazing. That's yet another great opportunity you have called out for, Vineet. And we see a lot of questions coming over here. And with the constraint of time, I would request all the panel members to leave the last few words for the audience to keep them in the mind before we end the session for today. We'll start from you, Vineet.
Okay. I think from my perspective, I've already said, stay put. It is a tough time. It will also require tough decisions. And I think people who take the tough decisions today and don't postpone it for tomorrow will survive and will be able to pull back very strongly. There's a question already on 21-22, and I definitely think there's going to be a large recovery if we find a cure in the next 9 months, or if there are no more episodes of this lockdown. We are up for a V recovery. Anyways, 21-22 will look far better than 2021 because we were shut down in April, May, June, and July, August was bad. So anyways, it's going to be a fantastic 21-22 if we find a cure. But don't plan for long term. Don't plan for that 21-22 today. Let the eggs hatch and then you count on the chickens. Don't start counting in today and put money unless you have money. If you have money, go for it. And I think you will realize that this is the best opportunity to buy things around. As Bijou was saying, if you have the money, go for that mergers and acquisitions today.
Right. Mr. Ashutosh.
So I think my last comment would be that, people frequently speculate whether it would be a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery. or a W-shaped recovery. I think the recovery will look more like a bathtub. So there would be actually a prolonged period of a bottom before it rises. But when it rises, it will almost rise like a hockey stick. So I think that piece one has to keep in mind. When that period will end, nobody has a clue. Having said that, I would kind of come back to my point that I think we are overestimating the impact that this one will have in 12 months because this is probably, if you look at it from the perspective of many of the companies that are sitting in this room, it is actually the best time to go out, invest in new things, get new competencies, try new paradigms. Digitalization, like was mentioned, is here to stay. And therefore, to kind of gather those competencies which were at the moment always on priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. So I think all in all, for everyone concerned with the retail industry, people on the other side or companies, I think it's going to be a good period, despite the fact that it will be a low-key activity for probably most of the year.
Sure. Mr. Venu, would you like to add there?
I think the next few months, it's all about sticking to your basics, stick to what your brand stands for, and what's more important is to simplify your business. It's a great opportunity to relook at some of the processes, some of the activities of your business, and simplify it. Get closer to the customer, get faster to the customer, and look at every channel and maximize what you can do. Online is definitely gaining, and people are getting more aware of online, but offline will continue to be the primary driver, because finally the look, the feel, the touch is important. But at the same time, people will look at online as a convenience channel, because and probably this is the time when people will start looking at it not just for a discount, but also as a convenience and a way by which they could get a product to them faster and better.
Yes, Mr. Bijou, your great work.
So I think a lot has been said already by the others, but let me just add two basic points. One is that if you're a company, and let me answer it in two ways: if you're a consumer and if you're a company. If you're a company, you're in a cash preservation mode at this point of time. You're trying to figure out how to be able to sustain the company so that it can tide over these challenging times, and that is the first priority that you should have. As a company, you should also see this as an opportunity to transform yourself. And when you think of transforming yourself, whether it's in terms of digital technologies, I'm saying start from zero base. So you can think of reorganizing the entire company. Don't think of it being structured in the way it is structured, but just go forward, think of it from a customer perspective, and think of who are my customers going to be over the next couple of years? Where are those customers likely to be found? How should I be able to reach them in terms of channels? And consequently, how should I craft my organization to be able to cater to the customer of the next 2 to 3 years? So I think that's the second part that you should come out of this entire exercise in terms